Using what we know about complementary angles, we can see that we have a 90-degree measure here. So we know that the sum of this angle and the sum of this angle must equal 90 degrees. So we're going to write an algebra equation that represents that. 90 degrees is equal to 51 degrees plus whatever the measure of angle B is. In algebra, when we want to isolate a variable by itself, we can do the same thing to each side of the equal sign. Because this 51 has a plus sign next to it and not a multiplication sign like we had when we were doing our problems trying to find the markdown or the markup, we are going to do the inverse operation to isolate the b. Previously, the inverse operation of multiplication was division, so we divided both sides by whatever the number was that was with the variable. But because this isn't multiplication, this is addition, we're going to subtract this quantity from each side. When we subtract 51 from each side, we get 0 right here, and I could write that in if I wanted to, but typically in algebra we don't. We just know that those have zeroed out, and we're just left with B, and then we can do our subtraction over here, which is going to give us 39. So we know that the value of B is 39 degrees, because 39 plus 51 does equal 90. And to check that, I can substitute the value that I found for B back in my equation and check to see if I have a true equation. 90 degrees does equal 51 plus 39. So I know that my answer is correct. And if I wasn't sure, I could use a calculator to check that out. The next circled problem is number 3. Because I have a line right here and this side is 90 degrees, I know that the opposite side also is 90 degrees. 90 plus 90 is equal to 180. So the sum of these two angles must be 90 degrees. So again, if I add those two angles together, I should get 90 degrees. This time I chose to put my 90 degrees on the right-hand side. It doesn't matter. I could have chosen to put it on the right-hand side or the left-hand side like I did up here, but I'm just trying to show you both ways. You'll find the way that you like the best. So again, because I'm doing addition here, to isolate my B all by itself, I'm going to do the inverse operation. And the inverse operation of addition is subtraction. So if I subtract 37 from one side of the equation, I can subtract 37 from the other side of the equation, and my equation stays balanced. These end up being 0. Remember, we talked about additive inverses last year. When you take a counting number and you add the opposite or the inverse of it, you just end up with a quantity of 0. So I'm just left with B on the left-hand side, and when I do my subtraction on the right-hand side, I end up with 53 degrees. So I always want to see if that makes sense and check When I add 3 plus 7, I get a 10 and I carry. And 5 plus 1 is 6, plus 3 is 90. So that does make sense that this is a 53-degree angle. Also, when you look at it, you can see that it's wider than this angle. So it needs to be more than 37 degrees, and it is. So when you're solving these problems, you want to be thinking about that. You want to be looking at your drawing that they give you and see if the answer that you get makes sense for what you see. Over here, they tell us this is a 90-degree angle, so we know the sum of these two angles must equal 90 degrees. And again, I'm adding 52 right here, so to isolate my b and find out what the value of that is, I want to do the inverse operation. So I'm going to subtract 52. And my rules in math tell me if I do something to one side of the equal sign, I need to do it to the other side of the equal sign. Those are going to equal 0. I bring my b down, and I have 38 degrees. When I look at my picture, I can see this is 52. This angle looks smaller. 38 is smaller than 52. And when I add them together, I do get 90 degrees. Now, the problems down in the next set are a little more complicated, so we'll work through those just like we have the others. We can see that we have a 90-degree angle right here on number 6, so we know that when we add these two quantities together, we will get a value of 90. But this time, instead of just giving us one letter for this value, they've given us an expression. And so we're going to treat the expression similarly to how we treated b. And instead of b, as they used up here, they changed to x, which is not a big deal. But we're going to take this and we're going to set it equal to 90, and it's going to be an addition problem. So we're going to have 3x plus 6, that's this angle, and then plus 48, and that is going to be equal to 90 degrees. This whole quantity is a certain number of degrees. It's not that it's 6 degrees, it's when we figure the whole thing out, the whole quantity will be a certain number of degrees. Now, I can see that I have two plus signs here. I have a plus 6 and I have a plus 48. So if I want to get my variable, which is my x, isolated and by itself on one side, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what I am adding or subtracting to that variable. And I'm going to try to get rid of those first. So I'm going to subtract 6 first from each side. 90 minus 6 is 84. And those go away. Those become 0. So now I have 3x plus 48 degrees equals 84 degrees. So what I can do now is I can use my additive inverse property, and I can add the opposite to get 0 here. So I'm going to subtract 48 there. And I'm going to get 36 degrees on the right, and I still have my 3x. Now, this is just like what we had when we did our percent problems. This is just like 3 times x. That's actually what 3x means. Remember when we were using the pawns? This is 3 of the blue pawns. So we're going to try and figure out what each of these is. And the way we do that, because we're multiplying right here, is again, we're going to do the inverse property. We're going to divide. We're going to divide each side by 3. So these cancel out because 3 divided by 3 is 1, and I am just left with my x. So my x is equal to 36 divided by 3, which is 12. So my x is equal to 12, and that's what they were asking us to find. Find the value of x. That does not mean that this is a 12-degree angle. What that means is if I put x back in right here, 3 times 12 plus 6 would give me the value of this angle. So 3 times 12 is 36, and 36 plus 6 then would give me 42 degrees. 42 plus 48 is equal to 90. But on these problems, you're only asked to find the value of x. I just want to point out that you need to understand that this is not the measure of the angle here.